Life Management Science Labs would like to acknowledge that we live and produce this podcast on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people. We'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands of our listeners and our international colleagues. We'd like to pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Hi, and welcome to Reloscope, the Relationship Science Insights podcast produced by LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. We are champions of life management science, providing structured insights informed by science and inspired by practice on key aspects of conscious living. Each week, we bring you scientific and practical insights on each element with the expert knowledge of professionals in the field. I'm Marie Stella, your host from Melbourne, Australia. Let's start the show. Welcome back to the show. Dating has its ups and downs, and one of the many downs is dealing with rejection. It's not an easy feat. So today I'm joined by Pooja Priyamvada, the academic director at International Institute of Mass Media in Delhi, who is also the course facilitator for Leadership and Management in Health at University of Washington. She's going to walk us through how to handle rejection like a champ instead of crumbling like a month-old cookie. Hi, Pooja. Lovely having you on the show. How are you going today?
Hi, Marie. It's great being here. It's early morning in Delhi, and I am looking forward to a great day beginning like you.
That's amazing. And I'm very aware that it's so early in the morning. So thank you so much for joining us on the show. Now, before we get started, I'd like to know what your experience with rejection has been like and what your secret is to facing it.
Well, I would say it's a lot cultural. So I've not had many personal experiences with rejection because my generation in India, women were not supposed to initiate or take the lead. So when we don't, there is little chance of getting rejected. But yes, during the course of my life, there have been times when there is a particular expectation from a man or a person, and it doesn't, turn out to be the way you want it to be. So yes, those I think are very human experiences that we all have gone through. And I think my training in psychology and mental health helped me get through it better. And of course, then there are those vicarious or secondhand experiences when your close friends go through rejection, or cousins or other people in the family. So you see it up close and personal, that how that pans out.
And you kind of learn how to support your close friends as well in their experience with rejection. So that's a great preface for our topic for today. But before we get further into detail, we'd like to get to know you better. This is Have You Met Pooja? So what do you like to do in your spare time?
Being a single mother, there is hardly any spare time, let me be honest. But whenever I do get time, I read a bit. That remains a passion. And now the reading is more also only about mental health, largely.
So do you have a favorite book?
I would say The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. I keep going back to it.
What do you like about it?
I like the simplicity of the book, the simplicity both in terms of language and the plot. And of course, it deals with universal human feelings that can be experienced by anybody, anywhere, in any context.
Absolutely. What about films? Do you watch any?
I do watch a lot of films, but I think one of the films that, again, I keep going back to is The Bridges of Madison County. Both the book and the film are great. And again, I feel the way it handles relationships and the layers of relationships is amazing over the decades. I keep going back to it and discovering new things every time.
So being trained in psychology, do you often find that when you're reading these books and watching these films that you end up kind of like peeling back the layers between the characters and stuff?
Yeah, I think it becomes a default setting. I'm also a media educator. So when I go to books or podcasts or radio programs or TV programs or films, that lens is always there because I do analyze them from the point of view of taking it back to the classroom to my students as well. And of course, then there is the mental health and the psychology counseling lens as well. So it's both the things together.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I went to media school, so I totally know what you mean. And I often find that if I like a film, I've got to give it a second watch, because the first watch is always like you're just experiencing the film for the first time, and then the second watch is where you get to analyze the things and peel back all the layers and get to know it a bit better and kind of just point out little Easter eggs that directors might have put in there, and that's always fun, but you can only really get that in the second or third watch. So is there a podcast that you listen to?
There is one by Professor Laurie Santos from Yale University. She is also course director of this very famous course about happiness. I think the podcast is called The Happiness Project. So that is one podcast I go back to. Again, it comes from the same area, mental health, and how to look after your own happiness and only happiness around you. So that is one I go back.
That sounds really uplifting and thought provoking. So it sounds like a great podcast to just have in your arsenal, your routine of things that you listen to. Um, but is there someone that you look up to the most in life?
Coming from a very strong background in literature and feminism, so it's all the feminist writers and poets that I look up to. A lot of them, I would not be able to name one, starting from Simone de Beauvoir to Virginia Woolf, Anna Akhmatova, Anne Sexton, a lot of them. So across ages, all these feminist poets, writers, they have all been inspirational.
Mhm. Absolutely. Thank you so much for answering my questions. I feel like we've gotten to know you a bit better. So now we'll move on to the interview. And the first question that we like to ask, because it might differ from person to person, is what is a relationship? How would you personally describe a relationship?
Well, relationship essentially is communication, right? But it is emotional communication. It is how two people relate. It comes from that word. So, how they relate in the world. And a large part of that relating is emotion based. What is the emotional expectation from that relating then translates into a relationship, whether it is between a couple or a romantic couple or with your spouse or with a friend, or even, for instance, a parent-child or teacher-student. Essentially, a relationship is that exchange of an emotion and having some kind of common areas in which context you exchange those emotions. For instance, for a couple, that common area would be love, would be romance. For a teacher child, it would be for a teacher student, it would be education. So a relationship essentially, I believe, exchange of emotions where and then to go further, a healthy relationship would be where that exchange is healthy, where it nurtures you, it does not feel abusive, oppressive, or compulsory, but it is out of choice, with consent, with happiness, and it helps both the people involved thrive.
Absolutely. And in your opinion, and this might differ based on geographical location, does a relationship, especially a romantic one, still hold the same meaning, structure, and importance as decades ago?
Well, I think globally, I would speak globally first. So we've seen that, say, about till about a century ago, the only meaningful and recognized way a man and woman could come together was in marriage, and that was the only form of, a cis hetero marriage was the only form of relationship that was recognized socially. But now with changing times and technology, and where people can interact with somebody sitting in another continent like I'm doing right now, the meaning of relationships and interactions has also changed. And we've started defining relationships very differently. So, in a conventional society like India, also, we now see live in relationships at growing between young people. We do recognize queer relationships. We do recognize relationships that do not culminate in a marriage, but people are living together for decades. So, yes, relationships have changed over the years. A romantic relationship earlier in traditional societies like India, people would not even choose their own partners. The system we had was families selecting a partner for a young person. But now, over the years, with all the dating apps, with more freedom, when women are stepping out to colleges to work, uh, there is also that exposure happening, global exposure, and hence people are now also experimenting and probably making their own choices free of the cultural context that are there in India. Religion, caste, region, those were the contexts that were considered when you started a relationship with somebody. But now I see those barriers breaking as well, because young people now are interacting in colleges, universities, workplaces. So now those biases are somehow being pushed back, and they are more keen to make their own independent choices.
It sounds like there's more room for exploring romantically as well. So, how would you define that romantic exploration? What does it mean to explore romantically?
Yeah. So again, I'll go back to my time when I was a teenager. So let's begin there. Uh, Trust me, in 90s, in India, late 90s, till late 90s, the dating was a taboo. So if a girl is dating somebody in the small community or towns, it was considered she's a bad girl, she has a bad character. Even boys were not, encouraged by families that you're having an affair with somebody or you're dating somebody. So we used to be a society that believed that young people only have romantic feelings or sexual attraction after marriage. That was our belief system. But now things have changed, of course. And as I said, the internet has a huge role to play. Access has become easier. A lot more people are just a text message away. And of course, we are connected to other people on the social media channels. So young people, of course, are exploring more. Now terms like situationships and casual dates and lot of other things are happening which were not happening earlier. And I don't consider it bad at all, because I believe that to know your own self, to know your own preferences and priorities and the non negotiables in a romantic relationship as an adult, one needs to go through all these experiences to establish those boundaries. Because the flaw in the earlier system was that you have no exposure and you get hitched to this one person without knowing whether your so to say your wavelengths match somewhere at any level. Now when you are exploring out there, you are probably going on dates with multiple people over a period of time. You come to know that this is what I want and this is what I don't want in my partner, or these are the non-negotiable areas in my relationship. So when that clarity comes, and with that clarity, they, as adults, they go into a long-term relationship, they have far more clarity, they have far more commitment, and it becomes easier then to navigate conflict, because conflict is inherent. I mean, even in relationships where there is a lot of love and mutual respect, conflict will happen. And often, that conflict blows out of proportion because the basic values are in conflict. When you know that there is clarity on the basic values and there are some common areas that you both agree on that are absolutely essential, the rest, margin areas can be negotiated on by both partners. So I feel
Yeah,
that it's a good change that people are experimenting.
yeah. Yeah, I agree. I agree that exploration can be a great benefit to relationships because it gives you a chance to eh, know what you want. And in this exploration, you are discovering what you want and more about yourself as well. On the other hand, with all of this exploration does come the dreaded experience of rejection, which is a common occurrence, maybe not for some people, but for others, yes, it's a common occurrence in dating, and some are unaffected by it, but some do find that it might sting. So, can you share what would be considered a rejection? For example, like, would it just be ghosting, or would it be like, it's not you, it's me, or external circumstances? I don't know. I feel like this kind of depends on the perspective of an individual. But overall, what would be considered a rejection?
So, you see, as human beings, we are social beings. A lot of our self image and self love we derive from the world around. Ever since we are a little baby, we look for validation from our parents, from the society around us, from community. And as we grow into teenagers and young adults, we seek validation from, people whom we want to get romantically involved with. And to make it more inclusive, it could be men, women, but yes, people we want to be romantically inclined to, we do seek validation from them. Now, that validation can either be only, for say, am I beautiful? Am I attractive? Or that validation could go to a much deeper level. Do I connect with you emotionally? Um, is my intelligence the same as you? I mean, do we match there intellectually? Do we see the same kind of films? Do we enjoy the same kind of books? What are your priorities in life? What are your values in life? So we seek validation, right? It stems from there. Now, I would call rejection an incident where you get invalidated. And that might happen a lot in abusive relationships with an intent, but sometimes without an intent as well, because I see a lot of my students, first they meet and then they become friends on campus, and then one of them wants to take it further and wants to make it sexual and romantic, and the other person says, no, I just want to be friends. So what they call friend zoning. So even that is one kind of rejection, and then they take it very personally. That, okay, till yesterday I was the nicest person and we were hanging out and I was your best friend. And today when I ask you to take it one step further, I'm not attractive anymore. I'm not intelligent anymore. So it is inherently related to the person's self-image and self-confidence as well. Also, rejection, of course, can be straight away rejection when you propose somebody for a date, a romantic relationship, and they reject you. So, and they say no. They do not say yes and they say no. So it's very apparent. But sometimes rejection comes, gradually and slowly, not directly like a no, but in a lot of gestures where they do not want to spend time with you. They do not let you enter their personal spaces. And that happens over a period of time. And that can be sometimes, as you said, more stinging to some people. Again, it will vary according to how the person processes it. I mean, was the association expected just casual, or was the person looking for a lifelong association? So, of course, it varies. I have also seen couples who come to me for counseling where they were dating for a long time. They were dating for 7 years. And then when the man proposed, she said no. She said, dating is fine, but I do not want to get married. And the man was shattered that, okay, we've been dating for so long and everything is good, but why don't you want to marry me? So rejection can be very layered. And yes, some people take it gently, like they take it like any other episode in life, for instance, a fracture, which they know will heal in a few weeks. But some people really take it to heart and they go deep into grief and sometimes into depression. And that is also a sad reality about rejection.
So, what are some techniques that people can employ to cope with the romantic rejection?
Yeah. So, one thing that I would say is preventive. Before going to, actually going through a rejection and then coping, I think one preventive thing would be to have clarity. In especially in Indian context, I would say, youngsters mix up a lot of things. They think love is equal to sex, is equal to commitment, and maybe will translate into marriage, which does not happen often in most cases. So there should be clarity from both the sides. Do we want to just be sexual and not convert it into a formal relationship? Do we want only a formal relationship and then, know each other? Do we just,
Right.
yeah. So So it has to be clear that are you dating now without any agenda in the future, or you
Yeah.
will see how it takes its own turn in the future. So the clarity
Yeah.
is missing.
Kind of like communicate about what the relationship is, whether you both want to get married, whether you both want to have kids, and then that way it leaves less room for rejection in a sense, because you've already talked about it, and then that way you wouldn't go on for the entire relationship thinking like, oh, this is the kind of relationship it is, this is our future. And then when it comes to actually doing it, you guys are both on the same page. So that's really important. Now, what are some of the other things that people can do?
Yeah, so this is preventive because when, as you said, when you have that clarity, so your expectations will be very realistic from yourself, your partner, as well as the relationship. If despite that you go through a breakup or a rejection, you should know that one failure, so to say, though I don't feel rejection is a failure, but most people do. So one failure is not going to define who you are. And this notion we have in conventional societies that one love is forever and one marriage is for your entire lifetime. Now, those notions also need to change, that there can be really deep and intense relationships that do not last a lifetime. Those are real facts. So, the acceptance that till the time it was good, it is good, great. You learned from each other, you loved each other, you had some good memories. But if it is not working out due to any reason, or if one person says no and their rejection comes in the picture, then you stop there. It need not be dragged. There is this Zen Buddhist saying where it says, let go or be dragged. So I often tell people coming from rejection, would you want to be dragged around with a cart that does not want to carry you? So this is what the relationship is. It does not want to carry you anymore, and you're just holding on to it and getting dragged along. So that is one thing that people need to understand. And also, as I said, because we derive so much of validation, especially women, they take rejection very, very personally, that, I'm not attractive anymore. I'm not good enough to be somebody's wife. So they take it very, very personally. And on the other hand, men take it very egoistically as well. Am I not man enough? Was I not good enough? Am I not good enough to father her children? So they take it on a very different route. So
Yeah.
for both the people to understand that a relationship need not last a lifetime, and it does not demean or degrade any of the people involved in the situation. It just means that those people have probably, evolved differently after a point, and it's better to part ways. So self,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
I find that some of my relationships which have been shorter than the longer ones, like that have lasted a few years, can be deeper and like more fulfilling and more meaningful than the ones that have lasted a longer time. So it doesn't mean that a shorter time spent with a person means any less at all. Sometimes it can mean even more. The connection can be even deeper. And also when someone rejects their partner for like marriage or kids, sometimes it's not about you, it's about them. It's about them not being ready for kids. It's not about you as a partner, or like it's not saying anything about you as like potentially a parent. It's what they think of themselves, of how they view their own personal views on parenting and marriage. So it's not necessarily about you, but it requires some introspection and a lot of thinking to get to a place where it's like, okay, it's not all about me, because I think as humans we're all pretty self-conscious. So that tends to be our human instinct to just like be like, oh, am I not good enough, is this why? So yeah.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. We take it very, very personally. That is, I think, not the right way.
Are there any other techniques to cope with it, or if we have friends or family who are going through this, what can we do to support them?
Right. So some people take it harder than others. And the loss of a relationship, we often come in counseling, it comes in the larger, under the larger umbrella of grief only, because it is the loss of a relationship. It is the loss of probably a future you were wanting with a particular person. So it is grief. You're grieving. The hurt is coming from grief. And with any other kind of grief, as we say, it goes through those stages of grief where you could be angry sometimes, there are other times you would be sad, at other times you would try to justify it, sometimes you would want to negotiate, okay, let's remain friends, and so that it goes through all those stages of grief, rejection. And if a friend or somebody from the family is going through it, it would be great that you just listen to them with empathy. You hold space for them when they are going through this processing of their grief. And if there's somebody who is struggling too much, where they are, suppose their everyday functioning is being hampered, and that happens, then there is, of course, help. There are counselors and there are helplines and there are professionals who can lead you through it. And that is where our role as relationship counselors come in. We do not only counsel about relationships, but also at the end of a relationship or the loss of a relationship.
And are there any patterns in how people react to romantic rejection and what their background or history is like? Is there a correlation there?
Yeah, so it also stems from our attachment styles, what we call attachment styles in psychology. So when we are children, the kind of care and nurturing we get in our primary families when we are children, that affects our adult relationships a lot. Also, it has often been observed that if, for instance, girls coming from families where the fathers are very domineering and they are sometimes abusive, as adults, somehow they fall for similar kind of men. Because at the end of the day, they're seeking validation from a figure of authority. If there are boys who were invalidated by a mother or a mother who was very, emotionally abusive, then when they grow up, they look either for women who are similar to their mothers, or they themselves become very aggressive towards women because all that pent up anger and frustration which they had for their mother and they could not let it out, then they start taking it out on on partners, sorry. So all these, patterns do get established in the childhood itself, how we react to relationships and what are our personalities and behaviors. But of course, there is a lot of social learning that also happens during our teenage, during our dating, relationships, during our interactions with other people. And of course, that also affects us. For instance, if there is somebody who was abandoned by a parent as a child, so this person might stay on in an abusive relationship because the fear of abandonment by a partner is greater than the abuse happening. I mean, they will think that, okay, where will I go without this partner? What will I do? So they will keep staying in an abusive relationship because they do not want to be abandoned. So there are these patterns that come forth when people go into counseling, and then they start also understanding their own patterns and their own reactions in relationships better. I've often seen women who come to me and they say that we keep falling for this similar kind of men, similar personalities. Why? And unavailable men, for instance, because they had a problematic relationships with their respective fathers. The father was unavailable emotionally, and they are just replicating that as adults. So yes, of course, our childhood and our interactions when we are very young adults, that does affect the kind of partners we find attractive, and then the patterns in the relationships. Who quits and who does not want a commitment, gets scared of commitment, who wants to cheat. There was somebody who was cheating again and again on subsequent partners because she realized that that was a pattern she observed in her own household when she was growing up. So yes, once we delve into it, they deal with it better.
I'm not going to lie, this is all hitting very, very close to home. I'm only realizing it as you were speaking that my father wasn't very emotionally available, and so when I was younger, I tended to go for emotionally unavailable people, and I didn't realize I was doing it. So for the people who are in that situation at the moment, what can they do to break out of that pattern?
Yeah. So one is, of course, the first step is awareness. But then awareness isn't enough, right? All of us know that we need not cross a road when the light for pedestrian is red. But do we adhere to it? Our safety depends that do we adhere to the precaution or not? The first step is awareness. The second step is understanding the pattern and being aware, putting those checks and balances in place. Am I again getting into this relationship just because I know that this is not going to materialize into a commitment? Am I just trying to fill it up, the gap that I had after my previous breakup, and I'm just trying to fill it? So, yes, as you said, the keyword is introspection. One. Second is that if you're not able to put those boundaries in place alone, then again, you can take the help of a counselor or a psychologist, and through some techniques and exercises that we do in cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT particularly, where you do a lot of self analysis. You do these exercises where you see that what was the thought and what was the reaction, and what was the feeling and what was the reaction. So, when you do these, what we call thought logs, it's a very simple exercise that we do: thought, emotion, reaction. And when you do that, you realize that where those things are stemming from and when to put a stop, when to, just take a pause and say, no, not again. I'm not going to do this again. Right? For instance, I'll give you one very practical example. If there is this particular staircase in your college, school, workplace where you stumble always, then mentally you'll make a note that, okay, I'll be more careful in this part because I always tend to fall here. Same is for relationships.
Yeah. So back to the topic of rejection in dating. Um, Online dating has become more commonplace because of technology. How does this change the dynamics of rejection as opposed to pre-technology, and what unique challenges sort of does it pose for people when they're seeking a partner?
Yeah, so technology does play a huge role. For instance, I'm in my 40s, so I would say that in our times, you actually had to meet somebody two, three times, know what they like, what they don't like, probably go on a coffee date with them or meet them in a larger friend circle. And only then the idea of proposing or rejection would come into picture. Now it is just swipe left, swipe right. It has become that convenient. And to be very honest, I have had clients who come to me and say, nobody is swiping me left. So, or there is
Oh,
a problem with me. There something wrong with me?
oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
oh no. So what do you say to them?
Yeah. So I tell them that first and foremost, are you just the profile? Are you just your profile on a particular dating app? Or you are a person, or you are alive? So yeah, then they realize that a profile, no matter how well written, or a picture, no matter how well taken, is not the entire you, right? Your personhood must be much, much larger than just a profile on a dating app. So what is being rejected is just that profile. It's not you as a person. But yes, for youngsters, it is difficult to understand at times because that swiping is very, very important. The validation now, for instance, they put a reel on Instagram, say, and then say, how many people would want to date me? And if it does, it gets only 2 likes and 2 yes. So it dents their self image. Oh my God, only 2 people find me attractive or find me dateable. So that is the problem with technology. It makes it, they want instant gratification. So I tell them
Yeah.
that, yeah, you meet people, you get to know them, and then if they do not want to be with you, that is a different process. It gives you that buffer time, buffer space. But that swiping culture is somehow more damaging because rejection comes to you fast and it comes to you at a huge speed.
Yeah, and it gives you the false notion that people are rejecting you as a person when they're really just rejecting your profile, or they might have accidentally swiped left. You know, it's really quick. It's left, right, left, right, left, right. I've accidentally swiped left or right on profiles before, so it might be that. You know, and I've seen a lot of my friends who come to me being like, hey, what's wrong with my profile? Why is no one swiping on me? Like, I've gotten 2 matches in the past like 3 months. What is wrong with my profile? Or what is wrong with me? And I look at the profile, I'm like, well, the profile doesn't say a lot about who you are, or it's not very representative of who you are as a person. So in a sense, they really are just swiping on your profile. um and that's not saying like if you feel like your profile is exactly who you are as a person, that means that they are rejecting you. That's not to say that at all. It's just that you can't really take swiping left and right as a rejection, because it's really not that at all. That's just it really isn't. That's all. That's the only way I can think of how to put it. So what are some things that single people should consider when entering the dating world, especially with this in mind, with all the online dating platforms?
Yeah. So, see, it is great that online platforms give them a lot more exposure, especially women and queer people, because there was very limited space where they could meet and interact with people. But now the space is open. Now they can interact with anybody from any part of the world. And that in itself is a huge learning process, both personally and romantically. But yes, there have to be precautions, the same precautions that you would take probably going on a physical date for the first time with a stranger or with somebody you do not know too well. For instance, what are the precautions? You would probably go to a safe public space. You'll not go to a new place. You'll probably not venture into too much of personal questions in the very first meeting. If the other person is getting too personal or too sexual, then that is a red flag. So you will keep looking for the red flags as well along the way, and not not take everything for its face value, but keep your logic open and remain safe. So that those are the
Mhm.
precautions we tell our teenagers when they go for a physical date for the first
Yeah,
time.
yeah.
Same precautions
It's
apply when you're dating online or when you're going on an online app. So stay safe. If you feel unsafe with one person for whatever reason, just draw a boundary there. Also know that, what is their agenda. If their agenda is just getting sexual, so if you are okay with it, that's fine. But if you're not, then that is a red flag. Also, know
Mhm.
them more as a person. That is very important. What are their interests? What do
Mhm.
they like? Are there any common areas? Also, along with common areas, is there something new that you've never done before and they're good at it? Is there something you have that they can learn from you? So, those are the things that eventually then translate into a great relationship. If it is only
Oh
about
yeah.
hooking up, then probably, you're going in for a lot of disappointment.
I agree with everything you just said that there. And speaking from personal experience, trauma dumping on the first date is a huge red flag. And then also not getting to know the person enough while trauma dumping or trauma bonding is another huge red flag. And I don't know if you want to know the details, but essentially, in a nutshell, this one experience led to being proposed to on like this third date, and it was just no, like that was not it. So huge red flag to avoid. But back to the topic of rejection, why is it important to address this potential fear or lack of ability to handle rejection?
Yeah, so it all comes from self love. It is very important that even when in counseling people come to us after rejection, we have to take them back to a space where uh, them as a person, without a partner, without a spouse also, how much you respect yourself, how much you love yourself. So self-love and self-respect are those two factors that need to be there. Also, not relating your self-worth to just one relationship. It is an important part, of course, of your entire life experience and who you are, but it is not the entire you. So understanding that, and also not glorifying
Yeah.
relationships. In India, especially, love is glorified. I do not know if you've seen any Indian films, but our films, our media, our popular media, our pop songs, everything glorifies love and marriage. So when a girl, suppose, goes through this phase when the man she wants is not ready to be in a relationship with her or does not want to marry her, it is devastating because she says she feels that she does not fit into that ideal bride or ideal woman frame. So yes, those are the things, that the pitfalls that one needs to.
So, is it possible for a repeated exposure of romantic rejection to result in any kind of long term emotional issues? And when should someone consider seeking professional help for this?
Yes, because if you go through similar, experiences again and again, where you feel you're being rejected, where you feel you were not good enough, and there is some problem with you, and as you said, it starts limiting your interaction and limiting your going out there and meeting people, then there is a problem, because it then is leading to a behavioral issue there. And if that is the case, if you are feeling scared of meeting new people and interacting with new people, and even if you have strong feelings for somebody, you feel, oh no, I should not go ahead because this person also might reject me, then there is a
Mhm.
problem and you should seek help. There is help. And of course, sometimes this trauma can be deeper, and it could also be stemming from a previous trauma that you've had in childhood or in a previous relationship. And these new set of rejections could be triggering an old trauma. So one should be aware of this and should seek help if they feel that it is hindering them from having a healthy romantic life.
Are there any positive lessons or opportunities for personal growth that people can take away from experiencing romantic rejection at all?
Of course, there are plenty. I think because romantic relationships or interactions are one of the most intense emotional experiences that humans go through. So, when such relationships end or there is a rejection there, it does lead to a lot of introspection. And that introspection eventually translates to personal growth. I have seen a lot of people who thrived not only personally, but also professionally only after a big breakup or a rejection, because they then realized their own strengths and they started nurturing their own emotional strengths, and they thrived very well. So, yes, there are, of course, lessons. And as we say in grief counseling, grief is a multifaceted journey. And often it emotionally makes you better. Your own empathy, your own emotional intelligence gets sharpened when you go through loss. So, of course, there are plenty of positives to take from this.
Yeah. And introspection, from my personal experience, is something that everyone should invest time in. I feel like it just makes you, it familiarizes yourself with your own self, and it also helps you find more meaningful, fulfilling relationships instead of, just defaulting to whatever that was established in your childhood or your teenage years. So finally, what advice would you give to someone who's currently dealing with the pain of romantic rejection and is looking for a path toward healing and self-discovery?
I would advise them, one, to introspect, but not to fall into the wall of, the well of the deep well of procrastination, because that is also one big uh, pitfall that can be there, because introspection can soon become procrastination, and then it starts affecting all other spheres of your life. Uh, and also the advice would be that do not take it too personally. It is just like another injury, just like a physical injury. How do we deal with physical injury? We do first aid at home. If we think first aid is not helping, then we go to a doctor and then we follow whatever the doctor says. And then in a few weeks, we get better. So, similarly, I think rejection is an emotional injury. So, we first apply emotional first aid at home, and then maybe a friend takes care of us or a family member. And if that is not helping, then we reach a specialist and they look after it and they help us heal. So that is the natural and normal process, and eventually it heals. Age old wisdom says that time heals all wounds, and that is, of course, true in most of the cases. That with time, it does not go away, the wound doesn't go away, but yes, the way we deal with it, the way we process that pain or that anger or whatever emotion we experienced because of the rejection, we are able to process it better, see it in a new light, and then, of course, that thought of processing it makes us feel more empowered and makes us feel more in control of our emotional wellness. So that is the process that one needs to go through.
That's really good advice, Pooja. Thank you so much for that. Now we'll move on to questions from the audience. The first question is, are there any signs that I might be taking rejection on dating apps too personally, and how can I address this?
Yeah, so as I have emphasized before, people are not their profiles, People are always could be better than their profiles or could be even worse. So we need to understand that we need to know the person in person. And of course, the interaction online also has to be more extensive than just a swipe. You need to know about the person, their context, their cultural context, their likes and dislikes, their personality, and then make a decision. So that is one precaution. And of course, you should know your non-negotiables. For instance, if you're not looking for casual sex, or if you do not want to disclose personal details to begin with, or as you mentioned very rightly, trauma dumping. So you should know your red flags, your non-negotiables, and then go ahead. So do not get too emotionally overwhelmed and overlook all your red flags. That is very, very important.
It can also just naturally be very disheartening to come across lots of rejection, whether or not you're reminding yourself that these people, these rejections, they're just on a dating app and they're just profiles. So could you discuss the concept of ghosting in dating and how it might impact someone psychologically or emotionally?
Now, again, you gave me a very insightful thought there when you said that at times people just mindlessly swipe. Similarly, online people do not often are very consciously, chatting. They might be chatting with multiple people, and then they lose interest, and then they stop the chat or they stop interacting with you online. So we need to remember that how people interact online might not be with the same emotional intent that they might do in person. So ghosting at times could be intentional, yes, when they block you or when they don't respond to your messages online, or they were looking up your profile every time and they were looking whether you were online or not, and then they suddenly stop. This could be conscious also. And then, of course, you need to go through this entire process that maybe this was someone I was interested in and this person was not reciprocating my feeling. But it could be unintentional. A lot of times people do chat with multiple people and then lose interest and just forget about it. And that is also human behavior. So we should understand that when we expose ourselves to that romantic exploration or experimentation, there is bound to be ghosting. And we need to know again that it is not about who we are. It is about the current technical age or the age where we are. It is also about the medium. It is not the message. The medium also enables people to just let the chat be or let those two ticks remain in the inbox forever as well. So it sometimes is just about technology and not about people and relationships as much.
Hmm. Absolutely. And I feel like I do get, well, I'm not sure if it's just the circle that I have, but I noticed that a lot of my friends who get bothered by ghosting of any kind tend to be the guys, the males, because apparently I think for them it's harder to get matches, which I'm not sure how true that is. I think it's pretty true. I've seen their Tinder and Hinge matches, and they're like slim pickings, and usually these people are like, they have pretty good profiles, but they, yeah, slim pickings, but that's besides the point. But it's definitely a technology thing, and I've been ghosted before. I've ghosted before as well, and usually I just, well, it's usually really a technology thing. Sometimes I tend to also leave my friends on red and kind of just forget, because sometimes we have lives and we're going through things, and it's a bit difficult to like kind of explain your life circumstances to someone that you've never met or met once. It's a bit difficult to be like, hey, serious conversation now. I'm going to move on with my life because I have things going on in my life, when we've never met, or you've met once. It's a bit like, how do you do that? But maybe it is healthier to just come out and say it. I think it kind of depends on how you view the potential relationship as well, and maybe different people have different points of view of that same one relationship. Those are all the audience questions that we have. Pooja, thank you so much for answering them. Now we'll move on to the open mic section, and this is your chance to talk about anything that you're passionate about, and it doesn't have to be related to the topic. So the floor is yours. Take it away.
Yeah, so I would say that one thing that we need to inculcate for all age groups, people across cultures, is empathy. We are far too critical of each other, of ourselves, and that, I think, is the real black area of our age, so to say. We are too critical. I mean, imagine we take so many pictures of us all day, of our friends, of our loved ones, and then we apply so many filters to them. And at the end of the day, if still that picture does not get a few number of likes or as per your expectations, we feel, oh my God, I'm such a failure, I'm such a loser. So empathy begins with self. We have to be empathetic to our own self. And then, of course, to our partners, to our friends, to people we interact with, and be less judgmental, because we often do not know the context or the struggle or whatever the hurdle could be on the other person's side. And hence, it is important to be empathetic in all situations, but most importantly, be less critical, less judgmental of your own self. And it all begins with empathy and then translates into self-love. So empathy for me is a key word that we need to learn and practice every day.
We're having some connection issues with Pooja now, unfortunately, but if you're interested in finding out more about her and her work, visit her on Twitter at SoulVersified or other platforms that we'll link in the show notes. Thank you, Pooja, for joining us today, and thank you everyone for tuning in. We'll catch you in the next episode. You've been listening to Reloscope, the Relationship Science Insights podcast produced by LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. For more episodes like this from 10 different life management perspectives, search LMSL on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts, so you can get updated on everything we have to offer. We have a wide range of topics readily available for you to check out. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider rating our show, sharing it, and subscribing to our channel, as it helps us grow and bring you more quality resources. More of our work can be found on our website at re.lmsl.net, where you can join our movement. I'm Marie Stella. Thanks for tuning in.